Welcome to Mr. Brown's Basement, a channel devoted to sharing the craft of repairing, restoring, and modifying vintage electronic gear, and other random stuff.
Yes, it's hard to believe that my workbench is empty, but it won't be empty for long, because it is, drumroll, Tuesday. I have a box of 3 Apple IICs that need some help. They're probably not too sick, but they haven't been looked at for a long time, so their checkup is overdue. So let's get to it. The first Apple IIC, it's slightly yellowed, but not very much. Sounds like a good keyboard. Maybe a little bit of cleaning of the keys, but not too much. A little bit of cleaning over there. Windex will do it. And moving it on the surface, the rubber feet are not in bad shape. Let's power it up, see if there are any other issues. Let's test it. I've got the power brick plugged in right there, and the video cable there, and there's my video monitor. Take a second to warm up. Okay, it says check disk drive, which is good, but the disk drive never came on, which is bad. Let's try that again.
Let's find out what the ROM version is before going any further. There is no reason not to upgrade the ROM, which is why I'm doing it.
Control resetting it to basic. ROM version 0.
Let's do the self-test.
The self-test is done by pressing closed Apple, open Apple, control and reset all at the same time. That's 2 hands worth. So let's get that started without a camera in my hand. It's proceeding as it should. System OK.
I have to find out why the drive isn't working, and also upgrade the ROM.
Being that this is the first Apple IIc, I'm just going to go over how to take it apart. There are screws underneath the handle. There are screws on this side and screws on the other. After removing the 6 screws, there's a catch under the front. Just push it in with a small screwdriver very gently and don't break it. Here's how the IIc looks without its top case. If you start getting strange characters when you push down keyboard keys, make sure the Dvorak key is not pushed down. Next thing that will come out is the keyboard. Note that if you turn it on without the keyboard installed, it will automatically go into self-test, and there will be no way to get it out of the self-test other than, of course, by turning it off or installing the keyboard. I've unplugged the keyboard from there, and this IIc has a memory card attached. That's the 6502, and that's either the IOU or MMU. I'm guessing that's the MMU. There's space for more RAM. There's 1 row of RAM, and just some TTL. Okay, this will just lift out. This is a super expander, that's what that is. There's no coprocessor, no clock, just a memory expansion. The memory expansion plugs into the motherboard into 2 sockets. It's the CPU socket and the MMU socket. MMU is Memory Management Unit, with these pins, so it's just a case of gently lifting it out. I wonder about that drive. It may just be a connector which is wiggled out. Let's upgrade the ROM first. I should be able to put in the new ROM without any changes. There's the ROM that needs to be replaced, It's a matter of taking a small screwdriver like this one and lifting it out and then putting in the new one very gently without trying to bend the pins. Notice there's a notch at one end right there. That has to line up with the notch on the new one right there. Let's try the new ROM. Helps to have the power on. Okay. Let's control reset out of it. Self-test is working. Okay, it passes. Getting back to the disk drive. Things that come to mind. Faulty 12-volt power supply. Faulty cable or loose cable. And of course a bad disk drive. What I'm going to do is get out the multimeter and see if I have 12 volts. I'm going to do that by removing the disk drive. The disk drive is held in by these 4 screws. See that I can grab 12 volts at the bottom of R4, which is right there, and ground can be found at pin 1 of the power supply. So let's see what we get. Measuring from ground, which is pin 1, in fact all these pins of the power supply, to the bottom of R4 is 12 volts, and I get 12.1 volts. Here's the drive connector. The way it's numbered is 1 through 19 on this side and 2 through 20 on the other side. I should be able to read 11.5 or 12 volts on pin 13, which I do, about 5 volts on pin 11, which I do, and minus 11.5 or 12 volts on pin 9, which I do, which suggests that it's either the drive cable or the drive. Measuring the voltages on this side of the cable are fine, so it's not the cable. That would leave the drive. In the drive there are 2 printed circuit boards. This printed circuit board is the board that regulates the speed of a motor that turns the disk. This is the analog board. Alright, I've discovered that if I turn it on, it won't boot. But if I PR number 6, works just fine. Why it's not booting by turning it on and off again, no difference. Well, after a lot of testing and head scratching, I found that it operates properly when I take the memory expansion out. Why is it doing what it's doing? And that I'm not quite sure. But at this point, I'm going to replace that tantalum capacitor, which is wired with a 4.7K resistor, so it looks like it's a timing circuit. And if that does it, great. If not, oh well, I'll just leave this out. And now on to the next one. C number 2 has what happens to many pieces of old Apple equipment. It has liquefying feet. So there's a rubber foot, and now it's stuck like bubblegum. And it turns gross after a while. So I'm going to dig them out. This one is quite a bit more yellow than the first one. It's also a little bit dirtier, and it has a different keyboard.
One with international characters.
So this may have come from a different market. It's also got some adhesive where a LCD display used to be. Let's see what ROM version it is. Well, I can't, because there's something wrong with it. When I turn it on, the power light comes on very dimly, and it just makes a crackling sound through the speaker, which suggests perhaps the power supply is bad. This one is a different keyboard, one with a spongier feeling. I don't care for this one as much. And it also has a memory expansion board with a battery. This one has a ZRAM Ultra 2, that's Applied Engineering, fully populated board. I think it's got a megabyte in it. There's the 6502 and MMU again, and there's the battery. I wouldn't be surprised if it's corroded. Maybe this is the problem. Well, there's corrosion, blue corrosion on the crystal and on the trimmer. It's just crawling up those contacts and those leads. That's not a good thing. This is what I was worried about during my display phone video. I was worried the battery there was deteriorating and doing this. Fortunately, it wasn't. Okay, now the ZRAM has been removed. I get a light, but nothing else. Okay. Let's see if I get any video. Ooh, that's not a good thing. More likely than not, that symptom is due to a bad memory chip. And there are 16 memory chips. The rest of them are hidden underneath the drive. So the next thing that's going to happen is the drive's going to come out. Before going any further, make sure that I'm getting the correct voltages, all available on this plug for the disk drive. Pin 13, 11.5 volts, pin 11, 5 volts, and pin 9, minus 12 and minus 11.5 volts. And I am getting all the correct voltages on that connector. What I'm going to do is take out my logic probe and see if I can detect any busyness on the data lines of the RAM. If the RAM is not busy, it's probably bad. Pin 2 and pin 14 are the data lines for the memory chips. And there are 3 chips that are not doing anything. So I suspect 3 chips are bad. The power supply comes out with just 2 screws, and then it can be unplugged from its connector. 9 screws hold the motherboard in. Now that it's out, I can focus on the 3 RAM chips that need to be replaced. Just for the record, they're Oki M3764-20RS. And I've put tape on the questionable ones so that I don't amputate the wrong arm. Sometimes repairs don't go as expected. This is one such example. I discovered, after replacing those 3 RAM, that things still weren't quite right. So after poking around on the MMU, I discovered that one of the pins wasn't receiving power, even though the solder joint on the other side was fine. So the socket is fatiguing or oxidizing. It's just not making contact no matter what I did. So I've soldered a jumper on so that, at least in that place, things are working as they should. I'm still not getting a picture, but things are beginning to happen on the motherboard where they weren't happening before. I'm going to poke around some more on the MMU and see if any other connections aren't being made. It seems a number of pins on this socket aren't working and not making contact. I have to replace the socket, which I suppose I could do, but I would prefer to have like a 40-pin machine contact socket that I could just stick in, but I don't have one. I've got a new MMU socket installed and put the MMU in, and I've just powered it up, and because there's no keyboard, there will be a continuous self-test. It's actually looking good on the screen. So if it gives me 5 chirps in just a moment, then that means that that MMU socket at the very least, and possibly those 3 RAM, were bad. This is way more work than I had in mind. Sounds good. Now that I've got the keyboard installed, I can determine that the ROM version is ROM 0. It should be good to go to replace this ROM with the newest ROM. It's unusual that a socket like the MMU socket would fail, but I think the reason is this. I think that some of this battery corrosion has found its way down the pins. I don't know, but it's a bit of a coincidence that this plugs into the MMU and CPU and the MMU socket is bad. This is pretty ugly, and I think I'm going to save this for another video. This is the third and last Apple IIc in 2C Tuesday. This one has the bubblegum feet that need to be replaced. As you see, it's already sticking to my bubble wrap. Let's see if it works first. This one apparently works. This one is another ROM 0. Hopefully I don't find anything else, but if I do, I do. This one contains a fully populated AE ZRAM 2. I don't think I've ever seen one in person, but I have now. With this memory board, I do have to take it out to get to the ROM underneath. Unfortunately, it contains this lower quality keyboard. It doesn't have the really good feel that some Apple IIc keyboards have. It's not the worst I've felt, but not great. I did notice that the spacebar has an issue. It's missing this little white piece here, which holds in that bar. And the spacebar just fell out onto the floor. Not much I can do without another one of these. It not just holds this in place, but it falls into a little receptacle that keeps the spacebar in the right place. I suppose I could decapitate a key switch and use the stem, possibly. I took a piece of perforated board, the kind that you build prototypes on, and I cut it and filed it into a little piece. It's not perfect. I wish it wasn't perforated, but it is. That gives it less strength, but it looks like it might work. Or it might be better than nothing at all. Not perfect, but better. Well, that's it for this video. I still have this memory expansion board, the one that prevented the Apple IIc from booting properly. And I have this ZRAM Ultra 2, which has had its battery removed. There are still plenty of issues. For example, that tuning capacitor should not have blue internals. I will worry about that another day. I hope you enjoyed this 2C Tuesday. I hope you'll consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to this channel, Mr. Brown's Basement, for more interesting and unusual videos.